Good morning, everybody, and thank you back to you. I'm very happy to be invited to these webinars organized by Erasmus projects because it's the very nice way, right? Like to join these both worlds of like policy from a very broad perspective when we work at a new level, and then like the work on the ground and how this can be implemented. And so I'm equally happy to be here with you, and I appreciate a lot the invitation. And as you said, I am the policy officer at the European Commission who covers the file on micro-credentials related to VET and to the labor market. So what we try to promote is like the main policy document that we have, that is a council recommendation on a European approach to micro-credentials. And what I would like to do in my brief presentation is like, first of all, to remember or to bring into the discussion the rationale behind this council recommendation, right? Like what is the EU doing and why the EU decided to step in to put order in this world of micro-credentials. And then I will share with you what's going on at the moment, like what's the work that we are doing, and of course, like to look a bit into the future to see what can we expect, even though it is of course super early to assess, but like we can already have like a good idea at least of the direction based on the new political guidelines of the new commission. So first of all, you know that the work of micro-credentials is very much or is framed within the overall skills development policy of the EU. The main framework for that is the European Skills Agenda that is running until 2025. And the whole idea of this skills agenda is to promote a mindset of lifelong learning in the EU. The idea is that upskilling and reskilling becomes the norm, that is not anymore enough with going to university or to a vet school after our secondary education, right? And then that's it, like you are trained on something and then you get into the labor market. But with the rapid change of the labor market, very much also related to the green and digital transitions, we need to be constantly upskilling and reskilling if we don't want like two things, right? Like if we don't want to leave anyone behind, so that's about people to have the right skills to go to the labor market, but also if we want to have a competitive market in the EU, which is now also a keyword, right? So that the companies and the labor market has the adequately skilled workforce that it needs. So that's a bit like the overall context of like where micro-credentials are placed within EU policy. And for that, like another way to portray that is like by the targets that the EU has related to skills. Those targets are meant to be reached by 2030. And they relate to skills insofar the first one is that we aim at having at least 60% of adult population participating in training every year. This is how it would translate this idea of like we want to mainstream a mindset of lifelong learning. That means that 6 out of 10 people in Europe every year should be following a training. Like think about that with us, right? Like with the number of people we are here, and what would that mean? That 60% of us every year we enroll in a training to upskill and reskill. So that's the target, the first target by 2030. And then the other two relate to digital skills specifically. And you know, like digital is related to everything, right? So the first one is related to basic digital skills, and the idea is that at least 80% of Europeans have at least basic digital skills. And that's fundamental for the labor market, but not only, it's also fundamental for social inclusion because there are so many services that now run on digital and you leave the risk as well of being excluded from society if you are not able to at least have these basic digital skills. And the third target is more related maybe to competitiveness. It's expressed in absolute numbers, like it's not a percentage anymore. And the idea is like to have at least 20 million ICT specialists in the EU. At the moment, we are around 10. So the idea is like to really have a workforce who can work for having these advanced digital skills, which that is what the labor market needs. So, and this target also has a component of gender convergence because it would be like a pity and a missed opportunity to leave women out of like these labor market opportunities. So that's regarding targets. This slide, I want to stay like super long here because you've been working with that, so you do know the benefits of micro-credentials for the labor market and what's the point of them. But this is useful for me to explain that micro-credentials are there whether the EU does something or not, right? Like what I want to stress here is that the phenomenon of like a growing, like an exponential growth of micro-credentials was there before, right? Like was already happening and is very much labor market driven. So there is certain skills needs that are not being covered by traditional formal education and qualifications, which are like longer and maybe more general and more broad. And then there is a need for these shortened, more targeted, flexible training courses that need to be certified so that we understand each other and like, okay, does this person has a skill that like for this job is required or for like this further training is required. So when this was existing already, what the EU does is like to put forward this council recommendation in June 2022 was adopted by the council on a European approach to micro-credentials for lifelong learning and employability. So what it tries to do is to put some order in this world whose beauty is indeed that is agile, is flexible, it responds to labor market needs, right? So neither can be over-regulated, but still we need some order because otherwise we have the risk of like of not understanding each other and like making these micro credentials impossible to compare and to understand. So the idea is like to boost the quality of micro credentials, the trust and the uptake behind this council recommendation. If you want to see it in this way, the council recommendation could be a tool for boost transparency. Because in the end, like from the EU, we cannot set how a micro-credential should be. But what we are proposing is a template, so to speak, is a framework in which it is very clear what has been done for issuing, for designing these micro-credentials, and so on and so forth, so that we can understand what is behind this credential, this micro credential, right? And that would make it easy for every stakeholder to understand that. But of course, this is at a very broad level, right? This is an umbrella. Then it needs to be implemented in every member state, like adopted by every member state who has competencies for regulate on education and training, but also by stakeholders like you who then implement and put in place micro credentials. So this is an overview of the council recommendation. Neither I will stay too long because I know you are well aware of that, but like just to stress a bit my point of like this council recommendation of it as a tool to put order in this world of micro credentials. So it established 3 building blocks. First of all, it proposed a common definition, which is already huge, right? Like when you read research on micro credentials, first of all, it's like, okay, what are we talking about? And the EU approach to micro-credentials established that a micro-credential is the record of a learning outcome. So we are not talking about recording the attendance to a course or the participation in a course, but to record what has been learned out of this small learning experience, which can be in a formal setting, but it can also be for non-formal and informal learning, right? So potentially micro-credentials can also be used, for example, for recording like a prior learning that has been acquired, for example, in an apprenticeship or just working in a company or so. So then what it also put forward, the council recommendation is the standard elements for describing a micro-credentials. And what does this mean is that, okay, you have a micro-credential, whether digital or on paper, and it should include the title of the micro-credential, the notional workload, the learning outcomes, of course, the name of the awarding bodies, and to do it in a way that the more you can use existing tools and reference frameworks so that we can compare that and know what are we talking about, the better. When you cannot, okay, do it somehow else, right? For example, the notional workload. If you can describe it in ECTS, perfect. If you cannot, do it somehow else, but do it, right? That's what I mean with the having this template for the sake of transparency. That's the whole point. And thirdly, it is also well established in Annex 2, the principles for design and issuance micro-credentials. And there, for example, quality is key, or transparency, or that micro-credentials should be learner-centered. That is to say that they are flexible. It should be taken as an opportunity to adapt to the needs of the learner so that we really promote and boost lifelong learning and upskilling and reskilling. Then the key areas of action and the Council recommendation is the establishment of ecosystems, which for that these Erasmus projects are key, right? It's like, okay, who we are, who do we need to understand this micro-credential? Let's engage everybody from the beginning and let's create an ecosystem where this micro-credential is understood and makes sense. That would be more or less the meaning. Then deliver on the potential of micro-credentials, which is also very much related to social inclusion. And in that way, like the approach of this webinar is very interesting, right? Like this empowering learners, like empowering workers to work in the green sector. And then also the Commission support that I will elaborate a bit in the next slides. And the focus is both education, training, and skills policy, but also active labor market policies. And in that sense, it's also a bit challenging to work with this Council recommendation because the scope is very broad. So you can understand that we do not have the same challenges if it's a university who want to issue a micro-credential, right, that maybe have very well established governance structure to create a credential, right? And then if we talk, for example, of a trade union or of an employer organization who want to issue a credential, and maybe they are way better at knowing what are the skills of the labor market, but maybe less experience on knowing how to put together a training course and a whole credentialing system. So like just to give this overview and rationale for the Council recommendation. This slide is like just a compilation of some research that has been done on micro-credentials, specifically from ETF and CEDEFOP, that are decentralized EU agencies specialized on that. And then there was also a research project that we did with the OECD. As we will share the presentation with you afterwards, you can like have this in hand. And then what I would like to present is like what is the ongoing work that we are doing from the Commission on micro-credentials, right, to promote this EU approach. So first of all, we are doing an exercise of collecting feedback from member states to see their state of recommendation of the Council, their state of implementation of the Council recommendation. So we created a survey that we've been distributing both like during this summer to higher education member state authorities, but also to vet authorities and also to labor market, like public employment services. So to cover this broader scope of the Council recommendation to see what's going on in every member state. The report will be available by the end of the year and will be very interesting to have like this overview of like, okay, so at a member state level, what is on the ground going on, right? Then there are 12 Erasmus Plus Program looking projects ongoing. And there is also a policy experimentation call whose results will be ready soon. So also from Erasmus Plus, you know it well, micro-credentials are being implemented. And finally, one thing that we do is like to organize regularly peer learning activities. The latest one was in January this year and in May this year on a specific focus where member state authorities participate to learn from each other. So there is always a host country. On the latest one, like the one we did in May, it was about like the main topic was on building trust in micro-credentials for improving employability. The host country was Croatia, and we have published a report on that. So it's also on the link there, and you can go and take a look. And the idea is like to create a bit of a safe space in this peer learning activity so that countries can really share their pain points and the things that have worked, but the things that maybe were a challenge, because maybe like that helps to implement at the member state level, and that's what the EU can do, right? Like to support this coordination and this mutual learning. And my last slide has to do with like how does it look, micro-credentials in the future in the new Commission. So of course it's too early to assess, but one thing that is clear is that there is definitely a new push for skills. This slide is very much based on the new political guidelines for the new term and also on the mission letter addressed to the designated Executive Vice President, Minzatu, that will cover people and skills. And there is a big importance on skills development. So it is suggested as an initiative, a union of skills that would be the continuation of the current skills agenda. There is also an initiative, like a concrete initiative for a new European strategy for vocational education and training, and even a skills portability initiative. So it is clear that like skills development will be very much at the center, And yeah, let's see how micro-credentials fit there. But in terms of narrative, like it's fully aligned. And in the meantime, we keep working for promoting this European approach to micro-credentials. So that's all on my side. I'm open to your questions, and thanks again very much for the invitation.